Welcome back, everybody. I'm Matt. This is Flatland Relics. And I would just like to remind you that we save a lot of money on gas around here because nothing runs. All right. Up today, we're going to continue prepping the cab for removal off the frame. There was a lot more small details than I thought. Things took longer than I thought. But jumping right in, I'm just using a drift and a small sledge to take these door hinge pins out. The bottom one was sheared off at the bottom of the hinge, so I didn't have to worry about taking the nut and washer off. Just had to punch it up through the hinge. You kind of have to take the running boards off to get to this. I tried to do it with the running boards on. That's not on film because it was rather embarrassing because I had no room to swing the sledge. So couldn't get any oomph behind it. Couldn't put any chutzpah on it. Couldn't get the pin out. But now that the running boards are out, we should do just fine. There it is. There's the sheared off pin. You notice there's no threads on the end. The top one does have the threads and still has the nut and washer. Voila. I'm only gently tapping the hinge pin here because I did not want to gnarl or smash the exposed threads. Once I got it up in the air a little bit, use the drift to send it all the way through. And I bet right now you're like, wow, that seemed really easy. Oh, there's a difference between the sheared off hinge pin and the one with threads. They appear to be the same. One just is shorter because it's broken, because there's no threads left, because somebody broke it. I did not break that. But hey, right now is when I thought the door would pop right off, but I forgot. There is a catch to keep the door from swinging all the way open, and yeah, I forgot to even look for that or disassemble it in order to get the door off. So that's one of many hurdles in this video. The Power Wagon door stopper goes behind, I don't want to call it the A-pillar because I don't know if that's what it's really called, but the pillar in front of the door, there, that made more sense. There is a flat piece of metal that goes in there, and it has a washer, and it has a rubber stopper on there. The rubber stopper is what gently stops the door. That way you don't, bend your hinges out or the door flies all the way open. You don't want that happening. But in order to get to that, I had to get the kick plate off. And this particular kick plate did have a bit of rust on the bottom. I couldn't get all the screws out with just a screwdriver, the impact. I will say it's a lot nicer to go under the Power Wagon than it was the old D17. The car is very low to the ground and not that fun to slide under. The truck I can almost sit up under it, which is a nice change. I had started to take out the high beam foot switch, and one of the screws got stuck in the old threads, so I was able to just lift it up and nick the screw real quick with the grinder. In speaking with my wife about how I film and how I edit and my whole process for the teardown of this truck, I almost hit a point where I was like, maybe I'll just wait and build this truck and then make videos on a second one or something later on when I'm better at doing it and could be like a little more informative while I do it. I'm not exactly sure how much it helps watching me cut stuff up and take things apart and sometimes put things back together. But I do these for, it's just part of the journey of me rebuilding this truck. But if it helps anybody, that's also that's great. That's a good thing. I try and be of use. But I'm not sure how much it helps if I'm not really like able to have a rock solid process for doing things. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just something that crossed my mind this week. And I almost kind of was just like, you know what, I'm going to stop filming for a while and just keep going on this and not film at all. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to continue to film and, hopefully by the end of this video series, we'll have a running power wagon that's drivable and street legal. That is the goal. And I'm not doing anything too crazy with this. There's no Hemi, there's no 6-speed transmission. This will be all stock. So we're just going to rebuild some stuff and get it running. The kickboard side piece here, the screws were completely rusted to oblivion, but they were still holding on, of course. I tried to grind the little X in one and use the impact to get it out, and that didn't work. So then I was basically just cutting down the heads of the screws to nothing so I could slide the interior panel off the shank of the screw. So there's probably a few of them still left in the cab. We'll have to tap them and get them out. I'm sorry, I meant to say drill them and get them out. And then if we have to retap them, we will. So here's the rubber stopper and the washer on that flat piece of metal. You can't take any of that off from the inside. So upon looking at it, I kind of realized I was going to have to drill the hinge point there between the two flat pieces of metal. You can't see it in this photo, but it's the one pivot point that has a small like press pin or something. I'm just trying to check it out, see if there's a way to spin the washer to slide it off, because the end of that flat metal has two tongues on each, like a tongue on each side. So you can't get that off unless you basically kind of drill it right there where you see in between the door and the jamb. I was trying to do everything I could to not drill that, because I feel like that's just like kind of breaking a part that I don't need to break. So I decided maybe I should pull the door card off and take a look at that also. But all said and done, I do end up drilling that little pivot point and then just pulling the door stopper out from the inside of the cab. This door card is in really good shape. No dents or no bends in it, so it's nice to just pull that and put it aside. Maybe we'll sand that down soon and give it a nice fresh coat of primer. I have gotten some primer, some speed coat, high build to do the frame and the chassis and everything. I will be doing some experimenting with that to see if I can handle painting. I think I'll be okay at it. I have a little bit more of an artistic background than people might know about that watch these videos, so I feel pretty confident I can handle running this sprayer. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. That'll be in an episode for another time. Right now, I'm still in the teardown mode, trying to get this cab apart. I wanted to get this cab off before the new year, and obviously, since we're watching the video of me taking the cab off, I did succeed in that small goal, and it's nice to have small goals get met. Once I had taken the door card off and put it aside, I realized there was no access to this door stopper pivot hinge part. One day I'll look the part name up, and that way I can name it correctly, but we'll just call it that for now. So yeah, this is just I'm going to have to drill it. I did exhaust all my other options to not just come through and wreck something. I'm trying not to destroy stuff on this truck as I take it apart. I know there will be bumps in that road, as there always is, but I do my best to try and take things apart before I just drill or cut stuff. Hammering this pivot point with a drift to try and push the pin up did not work. The pin looks like the type of thing that you would slide in from the top and then squeeze it, and it mushrooms the bottom out to lock it in. So it's probably some sort of soft metal. I'm not 100% sure how they manufactured that, but I'm sure it's some kind of press pin. And just like that, it's two pieces. There we go. It might seem kind of simple, but every time something gets done, it's a small victory. It's one more thing off the list. I'll bet a lot of you folks have no idea that I also practice magic. Oh, wow. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. So there's 4 screws that hold on the glove box cover, glove box door. They're 4 tiny screws. I did not use the impact for this. I didn't want to completely annihilate the screw heads. I didn't want any of them to break off. So I just did them by hand. They did come out pretty easy. These screws all have a small, one of those like star-looking lock washers. They were more common years ago. You don't really see them in modern stuff. People just use a normal lock washer now. But I noticed tearing down old Dodge stuff, they used to use them all the time. All different sizes, all different applications, and I'm sure they worked. For some reason, they switched to the other style later on, though. I did not pull the hinge assemblies out. There's one of the screws with the little lock washer. There's the rat's nest of a glove box that's left. I was trying to hold the camera and the light and get my hand in there, and it just kind of didn't really work. It's full of dirt and old mouse stuff, so. I'm waiting for the tool to properly pull off the steering wheel. I didn't add this in the video, but I used the wrong puller for the steering wheel and broke all the bakelite. Luckily, it was just big pieces. I should be able to repair it. We'll see. But then I realized we're going to have to attack this from the frame area, not from inside the cab. So I wanted to try and get the drag link off the pitman arm. I am unsuccessful in doing this. The first weird thing I encountered was a rag wrapped around the pitman arm. And that also had a piece of tie wire holding the rag onto there. I doubt this is a factory application. I think somebody added that there just to keep the grease inside or to keep the dirt from getting in there. I don't understand why you would wrap a rag around that and then wire it. It didn't make any sense. It was a pretty good rag too. I mean, I'm not even sure if it was a rag. It's some kind of weird material. If that's some kind of like leather boot from the factory, that would be really weird, but I don't think it is. And I didn't check the manual to see if that exists in any of the parts catalogs or anything. But this is just the joint where the pitman arm goes into the drag link. And the end of the drag link does have a grease zone. So if you're going to try and back out that like flathead style screw, you're going to need a special socket or a special flathead for that. I bought a scraper tool that I'm going to make into a specific tool for that. However, you won't see me use it in this video. I decided to just go another route and just pull the pitman arm off. I think here I'm still messing around trying to get this drag link apart from the pitman arm, and I cleaned it up a little bit, and I'm not sure I cleaned it. That wire brush is so full of rust, I'm not sure I did anything good. Probably put more stuff in there. Just trying to get some of the grease off. That area has a lot of grease, which is good. You know, it's good if you're driving, but it's not good if you're doing a teardown. I did try and back that slotted screw in the drag link back a little bit with just one small flathead, and it didn't work. So like I said, I'll end up making a tool for that. That'll be in a video later on when we rebuild the rear. So this is one of those 3-prong puller tools, and it is not the right one. You cannot use this to pull a pitman arm off. It did not work. One of the legs just instantly popped off, and I couldn't get it to hold tight. I did try it. I tried it because I did not have a pitman arm puller that was big enough. I had a smaller one for a car. So after a quick run to the store, ta-da, there we go. That's the 2.5-inch Duralast puller, and you're going to need that size to get over this pitman arm. The pitman arm does have a large washer and a retention nut. I just put those aside for now. And here I'm going to start to break loose the 4 hold down bolts for the steering box. Hit these with the breaker bar. I wasn't sure how locked up these were going to be, but they all broke free. So far, a lot of stuff on this truck does break free. And then other stuff, I just look at it and I go, nope, I'm not even going to try that. I'm just going to cut it with the grinder. But this, these came loose a little easier than I thought. I had one right here that was giving me a little trouble, but got it eventually. Just had to push from a different angle, I think. As you can see, a little bit of flex in the breaker bar handle. I definitely had a a little bit of force going into that. Put a little body weight on it, and it pops loose. The other three were not bad at all. They came loose pretty good. And if you pull the pitman arm and pull these 4 bolts, you will be able to pull the steering box from the inside of the frame. You can pull it out of the frame channel. And these 4 hold down bolts for the steering box have a lock washer and a large fender washer. I kept those together and just put them all aside. After I pull the box, I put all the hardware back on it. That way I don't lose it. If you just put it back on the steering box, you don't have to bag and tag it, and you just save yourself that much time and energy. So I left one bolt holding the steering box on, and that's when I started to do a little more investigating and realized I will not be able to get the steering column past this pedal assembly. I believe this is the clutch pedal, but I'm not sure. It's the only pedal that's underneath the cab right now. I know there's supposed to be 3. I believe this is the clutch. So this is bolted to the frame. It's an entire assembly. It's got like a little housing, the pivot point for the pedal. I'm just cleaning up some of the bolts so I can get a nice ratchet on there, get a nice socket on there, and pop that free. Like I said, there's enough room to almost sit under the truck. It's kind of nice compared to the car. It's a lot easier for me. I wanted to get this out of the way. That way we didn't have any hang-ups when we pull the cab. Just wanted to get the whole steering column out. A wise man might have pulled all the brake lines and electrical before they went and did all this, but I'm not a wise man. So I'll just constantly move it out of the way every step of the way instead. Two of the bolts for this pedal assembly go through the side of the frame, and then 2 of the bolts go through the bottom on the flange of the frame, on like the bottom of the C channel. And the same with this is the steering box. I pull the bolts, I set them aside, and then I put them right back in the same exact holes that I got them out of. That way, later on when it's time to clean up this part or reinstall it, I know what bolts I need, I know where they go. If you put them right back in the same spot, say one of the bolts is a 1/2 inch shorter and you didn't notice that taking them out, as long as you put them back in the same spot, you'll see it later on when you go to get bolts. This is the part of taking off the steering column that's like the 3 or 4 extra things you didn't realize. Yeah, this is one of them. So I just powered through and just pulled this whole assembly off. It's probably going to have to get taken apart, rebuilt of sorts. I'm not sure if there's supposed to be more to that like pivot pin that holds the pedal on. It's cut flat on the other side that you can't see right now, so I'm not sure if that is sheared off or if that's the way it is from the factory. And this was like another one of these sub-assembly things that had to get out of the way. It took longer than I thought. It took energy that I didn't want to put towards it. However, if you don't take the time to do this stuff, the cab doesn't come off. Let me rephrase that. Since I still had the steering wheel on the steering column, I couldn't just pull the whole column and box and slide it down through the bottom. So this was the way to open up the passage to get the steering column out from underneath. This is the only way I could do it, still having the steering wheel attached. It's just one more thing to take apart. Once I got it out of the way, I was good to go. I purposely leave in these parts where I put the bolts back in. It might seem unnecessary, but it shows, you know, it's a reinforcement of a decent habit. And then it also shows that doing this work can be tedious. It's very often tedious. You have to concentrate. You got to give it more than you think. You can't go in there and, you know, go halfway on stuff. You just got to handle stuff and pay attention and take good care of what you're doing. Set yourself up for the future. You know, I put all those bolts back, not for tonight so they're not on the floor, but for the next night when I need to know what goes where. So back in the cab, there is a double-sided steering column bracket, 2 bolts. The bolts do have a nut on them, and the nut is behind the dash. This one was a little fun to get to. Eventually, I got my spider senses and realized take out the speedo, and then you can get to those bolts a lot easier. When I put the speedometer aside, I did look at the mileage for the first time ever and just take actual notice. And this truck was 49,700 and some miles. So just a tad under 50,000 miles. I don't know if that's considered a lot for these trucks or not. When you're looking in the shop manual for these, you know, there's service on these like every 2 weeks. And people didn't drive as much back then as they do now. You know, people didn't drive an hour and a half to go to work like we do now. You know, I put almost 150,000 on my daily driver pickup, but I don't ever expect to put that much on this Power Wagon. But it just kind of made me think about, you know, how things were different then. And 50,000 miles on a truck like this was probably a good run. Although I'm sure you could get a lot more if you maintained it. Whoever put this first screw in basically cross-threaded it to death. I don't know if it was like that from the factory. Who knows? But it gave me a run for my money trying to back it out. You see I still got the breaker bar, which was kind of a pain in the butt to carry and use upside down because of the weight of it. It always falls off the bolt head. It's a heavier tool. So, yeah, I had my work cut out for me with this one. Finally, I had decided I'd suffered enough on the first bolt. Yeah, that made things a little bit easier. This bracket that I'm taking off, there is one above the steering column and one underneath it. So there's like one in the front and the back. And they're sandwiched around a rubber grommet on the steering column. And then the two brackets are bolted to the underside of the dash. So that's how that's all put together. That first bolt met its end. It met its demise with the old grinder wheel. And there we go. Boom. You notice the column sinking? That's because I only have one bolt holding the steering column on and it's not completely tight. I did that just so it didn't go clunk into the floor. When I go to pull out the last bolt into the steering box, I take a little cord. There's both the brackets. As you see, they look identical, and you just put the bolts through them. So here I just take this cord, just tie it to the dash, and it's just to keep that in the air. I just want to keep that isolated in a certain position while I take the last bolt out. I don't like when things drop. I don't like when things just drop unexpectedly or you don't know where they're going to land. That's how you dent something. That's how you break something. I try to avoid that kind of stuff when I can. One little extra step, but it helps out a lot. These steering box bolts probably stick out past the steering box mount a half inch. So you're walking a lot of thread out. It does take longer than you think to get them out. Just keep backing them out. They will eventually come to an end. And here again, I got numerous hard brake lines holding the piece in. There's a bunch of wiring around it. And I realized I kind of was stuck at that point. So get the grinder again, take care of business. And just to be clear, I'm only cutting a 1/4 inch brake line so I could just bend it and get it out of the way. And there we go. Got that down. And right away, after I crushed my finger for the second time that night, yeah, that one kind of hurt. Here I'm putting the nut and the washer back on for the pitman arm. And then here I'm replacing the steering box bolts in the exact position that I took them out of. The heads and the washers of these bolts holding the cab to the mounts, they were annihilated with rust. They're all pocked up. No way to get any kind of wrench or anything on there. So one of the things I do is I just cut the head of the bolt down. I just zip it down into small pieces and break it up until I get down to the shank of the bolt. And then I know I can take a drift and punch the bolt straight through the bottom. I don't have a torch setup, so I have to do the grinder and kind of just cut everything up. But the grinder doesn't always fit everywhere. And for these front two mounts, you're not going to be able to get a 4-inch grinder wheel into the mount underneath for the cab mounts. There's just not enough space. There's maybe 5 inches or less inside that little square bracket. So this I had to attack from the top and just, like I said, I just obliterate the head of the bolt and get it down to where there's just nothing left. This is the rear mount. Now the rear mount you can get to from the side. As you can see here, I'm able to sneak the grinder in and cut the mounting bolt right above the nut. Just be careful. You don't want to lay the cutoff blade into the bracket. You don't want to cut a big part of the bracket up or you're going to have to weld that shut. Just want to be careful. Plus, always when you're grinding over like your face or something like that, want to take it easy. Don't get too crazy with this thing. There's not a lot of room. If the grinder kicks and debris will hit you really fast. You won't even see it. Coming up here in a minute. Oh, actually right here. There you go. See how the cutoff wheel's fuzzy? Once you do that, get rid of it. If you want to risk running that cutoff wheel again, I don't know. That's just not worth it to me. You're not saving money if that thing shatters and hits you in the face. You're going to be going to the hospital. So just take the time to grab another wheel and make safe cuts. The angle I'm coming at in here, because I'm not laying down anymore, kept kicking the grinder over. And since I was holding it from far back, I was kind of not really in the best position. Did eventually get it, but, just be careful when you're doing something like this. Like I said, there's not a lot of area for the grinder to move. And as you can see, even taking my time, I shattered a blade myself. Or should I say I shattered a cutoff wheel myself. Now, I wasn't exactly sure that there was going to be rain in the forecast, but oh, there it is. Look at all the dirt falling out of that. Dirt, rust, old metal, I don't know, a little bit of everything in there. And people wonder why I wear safety glasses all the time. That was the small and big washer for the body mount. I thought I'd already finished cutting off this bolt head, but I guess not. Here I'm just taking the drift, good size drift, and just hammering that bolt through. Once it goes down enough below the cab, you're good. You just don't want it to hang up and be the one thing that doesn't let the cab let go of the frame when you get it up on the gantry. So here I'm just cleaning everything off, double checking, making sure that I'm all the way down to the shank of the screw. And I think I was at this point. At least it's nothing the old sledgehammer can't fix. Yeah, here we go. Boop. There you go. You see the drift drop down. And there it is. I think, yeah. There's the bolt with one of the washers on the bottom. I want to say the foam mount stayed stuck to there. When you're grinding, it heats the bolt up. So the more you heat the bolt up, the more the mounts are going to heat up and start to smoke and burn and smell really bad. So just be aware of that. Try not to start any fires inadvertently that you're not aware of. And try not to breathe that smoke when those body mounts start cooking, because that stuff can't be good for you. That's got to be cancerous. I have two ratchet straps, one heavyweight towing one, the yellow one, and one thin black one just to support the front of the cab a little bit. And just lifting her off the frame. There you go. Broke free. I had taken all the bolts out previously. I only showed you me removing 2 bolts, but there are 4 cab bolts. There are 2 in the front by the kick panels, and there are 2 in the back right behind the vertical for the back of the seat. It's like the seat mount and the back wall. It's in between there. You'll see them. It'll be the only big 4 bolts going through the cab. You can't miss them. Yeah, and here I'm just rolling the chassis out from underneath. You guys see me do this before. If you've watched the channel for a while, I do it with the car all the time when I take the body off. I am realizing that the height restriction in my gantry is, I don't know. I'm not going to say it's hindering me, but it makes things a little difficult. I wish I could have got about another foot in the air with the cab and then just smooth rolled the chassis out, but you got to deal with what you got. I never cut the back safety guards off the brake lights, and of course those are going to catch the cab because it's like 4 prongs sticking up like an inch or 2 higher than the actual frame. I should have just took the time to cut them off. I didn't, and as you can see, here's me wrestling with them right now. I didn't put it on camera, but I probably tried to rig this like 3 or 4 times before I got something that was comfortable. I didn't want to drop the cab. I didn't want it swinging wildly once the chassis was out from underneath. So I did a couple dry runs before I filmed it. I felt a little embarrassed the way I rigged that bed and took that off. That was kind of ridiculous. That was me just being lazy. But here, as you can see, I tried to have it so the cab would stay almost level in the air. That's not as easy as it seems, but we did pretty good. I was happy with this. I felt it was pretty safe. And then earlier I had made a small cart. Get yourself some small beams or some steel of any sort and get yourself some casters from Harbor Freight. They're like $15 a piece. Get the nice soft ones. They roll really good in the shop. And they roll nice over all kinds of dirt and crud and rust and stuff that's on the floor. Now, I had made my cart the width of the frame rails, and that was a mistake that I didn't see until like literally right now. I'm like, oh, wait, the inside of the cab section is too wide. It's not going to touch anything. So, realizing this, I just quick grabbed a chunk of 4x4 and made 2 cross members out of wood so that way I could sit the cab on that. I'll have to pop those welds on my cart rails and move them a little wider. I didn't realize that the cab mounts are actually wider than the frame because the brackets are on the outside of the frame. So I was a couple inches short on the front and the back. oh well, these things happen. Sometimes you don't see what you need until you're right there staring at it. So luckily it was a quick fix. I was able to do it without putting the cab down and having to relift it. And here I'm just marking the dunnage and flipping it around and cutting it up. I can't really say how many times in my life having carpentry skills has helped me, but this is obviously one of those times. My theory for building any kind of cart to hold body panels or to hold a cab or a car is you definitely just want to reinforce the cart and have something of some sort of structure on the cart, basically right under where the mounts to the body or the cab go. So what happened was my I-beams weren't wide enough and they didn't catch the actual cab mounts. So I cut those pieces of wood a few inches wider on each side. I can't remember exactly how much. I can't even remember what I measured, and I did it earlier today. But that way they reached, and if you look through the holes for the bolts for the cab mounts, you actually see the wood under each hole. And then you're lined up, and that'll hold, and it won't ever it could fall if you hit it, but it won't ever just fall off the cart on its own unless you do something to make that happen. I've been waiting quite a while to get this cab off. I was very happy to make it to this point. This is a milestone in the restoration of this truck, the rebuild, whatever you want to call it. For me, this was yet another small goal that needed to get hit, and it got hit. I'm glad about that. And now I can roll the chassis back into the garage, and we can get down to breaking the rears off, dropping the transfer case, getting the frame prepped and ready for paint. There is a very good chance that cross member right there has not seen daylight since the cab went on at the factory. There's transfer case. There's body mount with the marshmallows on there. The black licorice marshmallows. There's the frame and chassis. Yeah. It was cool to see all this. Be able to get a bird's eye view of all the work ahead. There's oil dry. That's probably from my dad drying up some oil in the cab, and that stuff just kind of sprinkled down through some of the holes. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. I hope you're happy with the progress, because I sure am. And I'll see you on the next one.